Hi, everybody. This is Allison from Alley Cat Creations. How are you? Hope everybody's doing fantastic. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel if you have yet to do so. And if you get anything from my work, connect a dot, an epiphany, a mind explosion, a new book to read, a new author to explore, please consider supporting my work. All the links are at the bottom of the description. AlleyCatCreations211.com is where you could see all my artwork, pyramids, hearts, gem skulls, and floral skulls, artwork, more pyramids behind me. All that fun stuff is on my website. Go check it out. And 3D memberships is a really great way to support this channel. Perks, they're great. I do oracle readings for the members as just a small collective. I also do raffles and giveaways. So once a month I do a raffle and channel members get a free entry into said raffle. Who knows? Maybe it might be you that wins the next one. Today I just did this paint and sip. We had storms. It's a small little canvas, but didn't know I was going to lose power. So I did a little short one, but I hoped you guys enjoyed that one. New Curtis book. New Curtis book. And it just, I didn't know which one to choose because there's more that I'm finding out that exist as I keep researching. This one is The Inner Radiance. This was written in published 1935. This was delayed coming out. Miss Curtis was ill and it took some time to get this out, but we don't have to worry about that, do we now? Probably not. Still have a cough, but we'll get through it. So just really excited to start a new Curtis book, and this is a nice lengthy one too. So buckle up. The Inner Radiance, Chapter 1. Quote, and the light shineth in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. End quote, St. John. Quote, for God who commanded the light to shine out of the darkness hath shined into our hearts to give the light of knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. End quote. Corinthians. Back of all evolution, there is an inner power, a manifestation of life, an inner radiance which pushes the unfoldment of all forms of life, from atoms to planets, on their destined perfected manifestation. The essence of this inner radiance is the outbreathing of the supreme divine breath, which manifested as a sacred word, which brought all things into expression, and which in man becomes embodied in flesh as the divine indweller. Science has proved that every form of life expresses some aspect of radiant energy or inner radiance. In fact, each form is fashioned by the existence for the express purpose of permitting its particular aspect of the inner radiance to manifest on earth, much as the hard shell of the wholesome nut exists for the purpose of enabling the soft, tender meat to survive and manifest in conditions which without the outer shell would crush and destroy it and prevent its expression here on earth. I love this already. Every physical form is but an aggregation of material and other substances held together by and through which a particular aspect, current or vibration of the divine one life finds expression. Of the gyrations of the inner radiance, the mysterious life force, can the inner and unseen pattern unfold materialize in matter, and evolve into the full expression of perfection it is intended to manifest. For like the nut, the inner pattern, which was breathed out by the Creator through the divine mind, must have a protecting covering of physical substance, or it can fulfill its destiny, which destiny was imprinted upon it, or it was sent forth into manifestation. And it is through the evolution of these outer forms, which are continually modified to accommodate the progressive unfolding of the inner pattern, that inner radiance molds all physical matter ultimately to embody God's will for that form. Take my breath away. Doo-doo. This is everything I say. Dun dun dun. Dun dun dun. Once again, reading a book, haven't just got this book, and it's just about everything I say. It's a great thing to be validated. Great thing. And everything happens in divine timing, I'm assuming, right? Wow. Just wow. These outer forms are not created in an instantaneous flash. For after God spake the word, and the inner patterns or ideals were projected into manifestation, it required untold ages for their inner radiance to overcome the inertia of matter and mold that dense and resistant substance into the meshes of the delicate etherical inner patterns, so as to permit their progressive unfoldment and correct materialization in the physical world. It requires tremendous constructive power. Unfold and evolve these out of forms to gather the materials and transformation and synthesize them into living tissue, to collect the tons of earth which compose a giant tree, for example, and to absorb and lift hundreds of feet into the air the countless barrels of water which are daily required by such a tree. All the outer forms which protect and more or less crudely outpicture their inner patterns are therefore sustained and evolved by the dynamic cohesive power of their inner radiance. The downpouring and inflowing of the life aspect of the Godhead, that ever-renewing inner radiance of the divine, which constantly pushes all forms onto perfection, that eternal urge upward and onward from the primitive to the perfected through the progressive new presentation and new revealing of the inner pattern or ideal of all things. This is equally true of suns and cosmic systems, as it is of the lowest forms, all but manifestations in matter of the divine one life. This law applies to man as well as to all other expressions of the cosmic currents of the one life. To accept the statement that God formed man of the dust of the ground, and to ignore the previous statement that God created man in his own image and likeness, is to accept the letter which killeth all true understanding of the subject, the mere shell of the nut, and ignore the spirit or inner radiance, which maketh alive. For just as in the nut there is a kernel, which is desired to unfold into a tree, and which is wrapped in the hard outer shell, so in man there is an inner kernel called the Christ child, whose inner radiance, although wrapped in the swaddling cloths of outer shell or personality, and therefore little realized and understood, is ultimately destined to accomplish its mission, namely to spiritualize the flesh and unfold the inner pattern of the divine real self. But only as we remove the restrictions of the swaddling clothes by allowing the Christ child to manifest through us, can we enable him to grow up and become the carpenter who can utilize all the experiences of life as tools and all the conditions of life as materials with which to make our body a temple of the living God, leaving behind as chips the superficial thing of the outer life. We are just a shell. We are just a body. We're more than that. We're infinitude. We are more than that. Sorry, I'm in a singing mood today. Once man realizes that his real self is truly a ray of God, hello, made in his image, hi, like my whole vision of sight right now is beaming right now with energy, beaming, and allows that image of God to manifest, the whole world will be changed. Man is therefore far more than the physical form, which was not created but formed or evolved out of the dust of the ground, through which his inner radiance manifests. Man is a microcosm or an epitome of the universe, the same eternal being from whose divine mind the inner pattern of all lower forms were projected, also projected the inner man, created in his image and likeness and destined to be the Lord of creation and his highest manifestation on this planet. The inner man, or first Adam of the first chapter of Genesis, was the real self, or spiritual man, while the second Adam of the second chapter of Genesis was but the outer physical form or animal body into which the spiritual man was to incarnate. But only when the earth in its lower forms had evolved to the requisite point did this animal human form appear. And only then this human form had evolved to a point where it contained the necessary organs and centers could the spiritual man be bathed into the human form. And it was only after the incarnation of the spiritual man into the body of flesh that man became a living soul. And the unfoldment, evolution of man as we know it began. If this fundamental distinction between the outer form or body of man and his inner radiance is understood, the so-called conflict between religion and science disappears, for both are true in their own realms. One is talking about spiritual man and the other about his physical body. Only as we allow the inner radiance of the spiritual man to shine forth in our hearts and manifest in and through body of flesh can we express our real self, the image of God, which shall illume, guide, and ultimately redeem from ignorance and sin, transgressions of the law, the man of flesh. Because of the effect of the inner radiance on the evolution of our outer form, one of the chief characteristics of all living things, forms, is changed. This is due to an ever-progressing unfolding of the inner pattern, a new manifestation or ideal for each form. That which is incapable of change has ceased to grow and will soon cease to live. Then the lower forms of life, which that higher form was made up or connected with, Adam's cells, bacteria, will have a brief form of separate existence until the old body of which they were a part is entirely disintegrated. Then the inner radiance which formerly inhabited the now disintegrated form is freed to manifest in the higher worlds. And in its next incarnation must build up and inhabit a new form, which will be less limiting to its unfolding and manifestation. Let's take a pause here. That is our ascension. That is us going from, hi, 3D little bodies, to, oh, we're starting to get crystalline, and then up, here's our light bodies. Let there be light. And we're going through that metamorphosis right now. We're still carbon and we will be carbon. And let's just say we might as well be carbon until this physical layer transcends, passes over, gets recycled to the earth in some form or fashion, and you inhabit a new form, or you jump into another timeline where your other self is existing, or your higher self, or whatever you chose for your soul to do. And that is the becoming of the next couple of densities and dimensions, is becoming aware of what you are, the totality of thyself, the understanding that you are also source, that you inhabit a lot of different forms and more, with more soul fractals in some than others. Like you might have a 0.0002% of your soul in a blade of grass, whereas the Palladian self that I am, I have 5.6% of soul in that body. So we got to really recognize that you're infinite. You have fractals of the ray of God that you came in on. You have inhabited everything and been everybody before this consciousness. So, and you are everything. That's why I love these books. Because I'm going to bounce myself off of all this stuff. But this is just a shell. Altered Carbon on Netflix. Watch it. It gives you that example. It plays it out through fiction, but it's a predictive programming show too, so just objectively listen. But it helps you understand and absorb if you're one of those that need visuals. This law of change is a law of life and applies to people's civilizations, customs, ideas, and religions, as well as to physical forms. When the inner radiance or the spiritual which quickeneth no longer finds free expression through a previous form of manifestation, no matter how vital and radiant with life and power that form may once have been. That form, be it civilization, custom, idea, or religion, becomes but an empty shell, for its inner radiance has withdrawn to seek a new avenue or form of manifestation. Applying this law of change to religion, we will readily understand that every form of religion must unfold and change its mode of expression in accord with the advances in man's conception of the universe and its laws. If that religion's inner radiance is to continue to shine forth anew and reveal its inner pattern more perfectly, like the rose whose petals at first folded tightly over its inner golden center, gradually unfolded and opened its heart to the sun and permitted its perfume, breath, to pour forth upon the air, so much religion follow the same law of change, growth. The air of mankind, which religion must perfume the font change. So my eyes are like, did I miss a line? Is composed of the principles and ideals, which it inbreathes and which vitally affect the spiritual, moral, and social health of the nations. Air, when illumined and vitalized by the rays of the sun, becomes to the physical universe the very breath of God, whose voice pronounced the word that was made flesh. Sunshine and air have been essential factors in the formation of all flesh since the beginning. But air, too, must change or it becomes dead air and often poisonous. The inner mystical truths upon which the outer forms, creeds, and ceremonies of all religions are built remain unchanged without the ages, for they are spiritual varieties, eternal in the heavens. But the outer forms which veil and only particularly express them must evolve and should grow even more transparent, that the inner radiance of divine truth may shine through more brilliantly to illumine the minds of men and reveal all the divine truth that it is possible for men's spiritual unfoldment in each age to grasp. If instead of evolving and more clearly revealing its inner radiance, a religion becomes materialized through adherence to the letter of its man-made dogmas and creeds. Then it ultimately disintegrates and disappears after having served its purpose for a cycle, as though blown away by the winds of heaven. But if it is willing to modify its former conceptions, its inner radiance will illume the heart and mind of someone or of many, to break through the crust of misconception and materialization, which has gathered around it the new conceptions of its vital truths, may shine forth in forms suited to the new age. Thus do all religions have their reformers and regenerators, and the old forms of expression drop away as the petals of a rose, which has spent its life force, fall to the ground, although its inner radiance still persists, either as a seed of a new rose or it's indrawn into the bush, that it may manifest greater beauty and fragrance in another, or perhaps several more blossoms on the same bush. Therefore, the crying need of religion today is to put forth new blossoms from the same eternal roots of divine truth. For no longer can the man-made interpretation of the medieval ages satisfy either the intellect or the heart hunger of the enlightened minds of the present 20th century, the beginning of the new Aquarian age. Hence, it is our present-day religions are to remind. Goodness, it's an old book and the fonts are weird. Sorry. Day religions are to remain a vital factor in the lives of modern men and women. There must be a new and vital interpretation of the world-old spiritual principles concerning the manifestation of the divine to men within man, such as the order of Christian mystics is endeavoring to set forth. In former ages, the heat and light of the sun were about the only forces recognized by the mass of mankind as coming from it. But today we know that the visible rays constitute only a small part of the sun's vital forces. Important as the visible rays are to the life of man and the planet, it is the downpouring of the invisible rays, ultraviolet, of the inner radiance of the sun, which penetrates to the center of the planet and there forms the four inner realms of radioactive ethers, which, together with the upward streaming rays from the various radioactive substances in the earth itself, are the most potent and which have the most important effects upon health, vitality, and growth, whether of planets, animals, or men. Just so it is with the spiritual sun, for although the spiritual inner radiance, which has manifested visibly in the various world religions and teachers, have been of great importance in the outer spiritual life of man, yet it is only the inner, invisible, and mystical rays of the Christ light, which has always manifested under various names, even though unrecognized and unknown by the mass of mankind, which has been the most potent force in the inner spiritual life of humanity. And just as we have now reached an age in which we have begun to recognize the invisible rays of the sun and begun to understand something of how to use them for health, healing, growth, and vitality, so we have reached an age when we must recognize and learn to use through actual practice, through prayer, meditation, aspiration, and radiation in speech and conduct, the invisible rays of the spiritual sun, the Christ light, for our spiritual health, healing, growth, and vitality. For it is this, a present little known mystical inner radiance of the Christ light, which must be recognized and used to bring humanity a truer understanding, a fuller appreciation of the laws of its manifestation as set forth in the gospel story. That light was the true light, which lighteth every man that cometh into the world. But the light shone in the darkness of man's incomprehension, and he recognized it not, just as the invisible rays of the sun and the radium have shone forth in the physical world for countless ages until the expansion of man's consciousness enabled him to recognize and use, although as yet only partially, their powers. To obtain the healing, revitalizing, and regenerating effect of the sun's invisible rays, we must deliberately expose ourselves to the direct light of the sun, for the healing rays are cut off if the light passes through ordinary window glass. Likewise, to obtain the regenerating, redeeming, and illuminating effects of our inner radiance from the mighty I Am presence within, we must have certain definite periods daily when we deliberately expose ourselves to or bathe in the inner mystical Christ light, or the inner radiance of an individualized ray of that eternal being, which is sent to earth to draw all things unto him, that all may have life, and life more abundantly, live more abundantly. Hence the vital necessity for a specific time each day for meditation, prayer, worship. Every advance in science which results in the alleviation of the hardships, discomforts, sorrows, and sufferings of humanity comes firstly because enlightened minds have deliberately turned their attention to the unknown forces and laws of nature and meditated upon them until they have conceived something of their possibilities and uses. Then comes the recognition of those forces and their deliberate application to the problems of humanity. In a similar way, if we wish to quicken our spiritual growth and unfoldment, we too must deliberately turn our attention to the unknown forces and laws of the spiritual life and meditate upon them. In other words, just as we have solar and radium solariums in our sanctuariums, so we must establish a spiritual solarium, as it were, in which we consciously bathe in the inner radiance of the Christ light of the I Am presence within. To help us gain this realization and apply it to power to our personal lives, we should visualize our real self, not as a finite mortal, but as a great and glorious immortal spiritual being, the mighty I Am presence, overshadowing us and endeavoring to find ever greater and greater expressions through us, according to our recognition of and response to his divine guidance. We should picture him so radiant with the spiritual emanations of his divinity that he is bathed in a dazzling white light which pours down over us, fills our aura, and thus surrounds us with its snowy whiteness, much as though we were encased in a giant bottle of snowy white glass. Every time we visualize this ideal of our real self and reach up in aspiration to and correlate with its divine reality, we enlarge the channel through which the inner radiance can descend into our human personality. Its presence will help us to overcome our limitations, redeem our mistakes, illume our minds, and fill our lives with the radioactive emanations, so that we will unconsciously be a blessing to all we contact, just as the perfume of the rose unconsciously delights all who contact it. As we make a practice of this, we will gradually begin to recognize and respond to any invisible rays of spiritual light, life, and truth, which formerly were unknown and unsuspected by us. Once we recognize, then we will be able to apply these forces as health, happiness, spiritual uplift, and unfoldment in our lives and radiate them to others, thus helping to counteract and ultimately entirely banish the seemingly inevitable ills of mankind. Thus, we will manifest not only physical health and intellectual growth, but spiritual health and intellectual illumination, which will make our lives spiritually radioactive. And thus will the inner radiance shine forth in blessings upon all mankind, because we have removed the swaddling clothes that obscured the Christ light within, because we are unfolding new petals of a rose of life And we have begun to bring the inner radiance into visible manifestation in joy, health, power, and happiness in our outer lives. And that ends that chapter. And I'm going to leave it there because, my goodness. And I'm heavy with spirit, so I probably can't even fathom right now. But what a fantastic beginning way to start a book. Holy shitballs. Wow. Very much the same stuff that I've been saying. You got to do the inner work. Stop giving your power away to everything outside of you and other people, by the way. That includes me. There is no one authority in existence besides source. You can have a million degrees and be in a profession and fields of knowledge and exploration, but if you go within and find that information within you, it's there. It lies dormant. It's not your wheelhouse, but it's in there, stored in the ether, or your quanta, qualia, outside of you. It's in the ether because you're all things. Stop giving your power away. We got to redefine our wording, guys. And it's true, when you go within, it just gets harder though, not gonna lie. There's a lot of things that I have been halted on bringing forth because humanity's not ready for it yet. But wait, there's always more, but there always is, and there will always be. So go within, really listen to the wording here. Photons is light. Consciousness is light. You are illumined. You're the light bulb that needs to recharge its batteries every once in a while to make sure your lumens are, but the outer casing is your body. There's so much more to us, and I hope that you stop limiting yourselves in that understanding. It's not putting yourself on a soapbox to say and make claims that you're this or you're that, or you're a part of this or a part of that. It's not egotistical. You're claiming and taking your power back from what you gave it away to. Stop giving your energy away. Stop giving your power away. Stand in your authority for yourself, not for anybody else. You have the knowledge within. Find it. There are going to be things like myself that I ask upstairs for clarity and it doesn't come. There's a reason for it. I just don't like it. But that doesn't mean it's not for my best and highest if I don't know it right now. But still, I signed up for this monstrous mess, and I have to figure out how to get out of it. But most of us are going through dynamic changes right now in our lives. We have Aries and Neptune that just happened yesterday or today with the solar eclipse and new moon. That's a lot of energy, and the Schumann is spiking. So be compassionate with yourselves. This is a forever journey of learning. So take in what you can. Don't rush your process, but also take into the consideration that no one person has authority over you. You are your own authority, and take your power back. Stop giving it away to everybody else for your answers. They're within. I get too many lovely souls who they just need to vent, but these people need information. No, they don't. They have the answers already. They know the answers already. They just need validation. You can validate yourself. I get validation from spirit all the time with these books or with the information that I get dropped or all the videos that I get sent. I know those are signs for me, and I watch, I listen, I learn. If you are just opening up your purview to spiritual symbolism and see when you see things drop in your YouTube algorithm or your Rumble algorithm or whatever you watch algorithm or whatever book seems to be jumping out at you. It has your name on it for a reason. Read it, listen to it, watch it, whatever it is that you do. There are symbols and signs in front of you all the time, but it's up for you and your soul to pick up those symbols and interpret them in a way that's going to help your heart space and your soul. Your soul put it there. Your soul put it there. So excited this book is in my life. I'm glad I chose this one to be the next one. Sending each and every one of you love, light, compassion, grace, shielding, and protective energy. Please go within. Be the shoulder. Be the lighthouse. Seed your truths. Thankfully, the storms did not affect my area as the past storms have. Thankfully, it wasn't too bad. But for everybody else in the midst of the storms, I'm hopefully putting my energy out there to lessen it and praying for everybody in the path of the storms tonight. Light the path forward and light it for yourself. Do the inner work for yourself. The more of us who do the inner work, the more we're anchoring our energy, the more other people are going to awaken and at least come to some sort of semblance in life. The more people that get semblance, the more the frequency raises and the more upliftment we have and the more quantum leaping we do. But it takes all of us. That's why it's called unity. Till the next one, guys, have a blessed and beautiful day. Light the path forward. Bye for now.